Welcome to Quantum Command Radio, where we talk about all things quantum. You can visit our website at www.quantumcommand.net or subscribe by clicking the subscribe button and hit that bell button for the latest and greatest within the quantum realm. Together, we will discuss topics related to quantum command, wellness, and explore all the new discoveries within this work. And now, let's go quantum. Hey guys, Natalie Morris with Quantum Command here today, and I'm in the studio by myself today. Jess isn't here. Usually she's here hanging out and we're doing podcasts together, but it's a weekend and I gave her the weekend off, so I'm just hanging out. And I was thinking today that I'd really like to get into a couple things about why we need quantum physics in order to get well these days. 50 years ago, nobody was talking about quantum physics and needing to get well using the quantum nature of the body. Everyone was basically focused on pathogens, toxins, take this, do this, and you feel better. And, a lot of times it would work for the most part 50 to 60 years ago. But now what we're dealing with are symptoms, diseases, major issues with our body that do not get well with traditional medicine. And when I say traditional medicine, I do mean the sort of medical field, going to the doctor, them doing tests, running scans, CTs, x-rays, finding out what's wrong, either cutting it out or medicating it to death. But we've come across particularly the last 10 years, probably the last 20 years, an uptick in so many conditions that cannot be rightly navigated by the allopathic medical field. And I think the good doctors, the ones that are good, are scratching their heads going, I just don't know what to do. I don't know how to treat this. All I know is to give medications and pharmaceuticals, because there are good, well-meaning doctors out there that are not evil. They really do care about people and want to help people stay well. So I think there's a group of them out there that really are sort of lost, and particularly with different conditions like Lyme disease or say fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue or autism. Those things really remain a mystery. Even cancer and tumors, they really will just kind of acknowledge we don't really know why this happens, but we can cut it out or radiate it to death, and we'll help you get through it and help you not die, hopefully. But I think for the most part, I think if they were really honest with themselves, they would agree that they really just don't know why these things are happening and why there's been such an uptick in these conditions and why they can't get rid of them. And that's where quantum physics comes in. It's really where muscle testing comes in. And if you just let me backtrack for a second, one of the challenges of being a doctor is that you really don't know what's in the body. All you know is what the lab results say. So you don't really know how to ask the body questions beyond reading the blood, beyond getting a CT scan, beyond getting an x-ray. You're just sort of putting together data points that are based on what you've been told indicates particular conditions. So if you have this score for your sugar and this score for your kidney enzymes and this score for your antibodies, then that's going to point to this particular disease structure. And then with that disease structure, we'll just pharmaceutical it like to death and hopefully you'll get better. That's sort of the model. And they really can't go in and ask questions like, what exactly is hurting the liver today that's causing the liver enzymes? They really don't know. They have these theories, they have assumptions, but they really don't know. And that's where muscle testing comes in. When done correctly, when done well, when done circumventing some of the ways that you can get wrong testing, you can find out extremely helpful information from the body. Even without using this quantum work that I developed, even without that, you can still get really good data from the body and even help yourself with oils and tinctures and herbs and even antibiotics. I know that probably isn't going to be the most popular thing I ever say, but or pharmaceuticals if you're in a critical situation. I never judge people that are on pharmaceuticals. They're just trying to stay alive. I mean, that's really what's going on, and nothing has worked. And they're afraid that if they don't take their pharmaceuticals, then they will die. It's really that serious of of a condition or situation. So I never tell people, gosh, if you just weren't on these 6 meds, then maybe you could get better. It's just really not that simple. It never really works out exactly perfectly like that. So I think that the muscle testing, even if you don't do the quantum work that I've developed, can give you information, can give you data that's really, really valuable. And I've seen people use muscle testing to help themselves get well. Not fully well when they have quantum stuff going on, which we'll talk about here in a second. It's very hard to get well when you have the quantum pathogens and toxins that we're going to talk about today. But for the most part, if you just have 3 or 4 things maybe that are wrong that might not be completely debilitating, you can get well using some muscle testing work and some herbs and oils and tinctures and those kinds of things and detoxes, that kind of stuff. But it really does depend on what you have going on in the body. I find that with my clients too. So muscle testing can really help you get the information that you need from the body to help you formulate a plan, even if you're not using, like I said, the quantum work. But I use the muscle testing in combination with the quantum work, and that became a requirement because I couldn't get well just with muscle testing. There weren't enough resources out there, even with the best oils, the best tinctures, the best Rife machines, the best therapeutic protocols. There wasn't enough out there to deal with what I was dealing with. It wasn't really helping. It would only help for a season, and then I would crash and burn. And this was in combination with an incredible amount of different protocols. You can check out my website, quantumcommand.net, and you can look at my story there about the types of things that I tried. And there's a bunch of stuff that I tried that I didn't even include on the website there, but I did rifing, I did all kinds of protocols, and I did incredibly restrictive diets, incredibly restrictive. That was just practically inhuman. I mean, and mainly that was because I couldn't eat any food. There was just nothing that I could eat that was that wouldn't make me sick or put me down for 4 days. So the reason I got desperate and looked at other paradigms was because this paradigm wasn't working anymore with just the muscle testing alone and sort of doing the tinctures and oils and stuff. So let's talk about why that is. When you're dealing with classical physics in the body, you're dealing with things like pathogens and toxins that obey the rules of the classical systems. So the classical physics we know of is sort of the billiard ball table, just playing pool. One ball hits another, it goes into the pocket. It's predictable, it's reliable. We know that when we do X, Y, and Z, X, Y, and Z is going to happen. Like when we go to the store and we park our car and we get out of our car and go to the store inside, when we come back, we expect our car to be there. We don't expect for a black hole to sort of open and suck our car into the pavement, close back up, and our car be gone or have disappeared. We expect that in the classical physics world that we live in, gravity works, it's predictable. If you drop something off of 10-floor building, it's going to fall, it's going to hit something, it's going to land. These are predictable rules and laws that we go by. And generally, throughout the ages, that's what our body has had to deal with. Pathogens that navigate and obey the classical model, the classical physics. A pathogen comes into the body, it lands into the respiratory system, the immune system and endocrine system react, it goes to that site, it's predictable, the pattern is always there, it kills the pathogen, it resolves all that, it detoxes you, and then you move on and you get better. It used to be that pattern was very predictable. In fact, it was funny, we were watching the Dick Van Dyke Show. We like these old shows, and it was funny because the main character came down with what was called the 24-hour flu. And I said, when's the last time you've ever heard anybody talk about the 24-hour flu? And that's sort of long gone. We don't really have where we just have a 24-hour flu these days. We have these elongated 3 to 4 week sinus infections that take us down, and we have to be on 2 or 3 different antibiotics, and it gives us migraines and it kills us. Like, that's the new model, are these prolonged illnesses that we can't get rid of. These were not very prevalent, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. It was rare for that. I remember that. I remember it being rare that people got sick as much as people do these days. So, and that's because our body inside was only dealing with pathogens and toxins that were in the classical model. When they got into the body, they wouldn't like disappear and bend gravity and be sucked into a black hole. And, none of those things would happen in the body. It was the pathogens are deposited in the body, the immune system reacts. If it's a really bad infection, yes, it would be prolonged. You might need medication to help you. But for the most part, things were workable. Like the doctors could treat things and the treatment could work. It was the rare case that couldn't be solved generally. So that's classical physics, pathogen, and toxin work. And what we're dealing with today is not your mom's and dad's pathogens and toxins. And that's why we need quantum physics in order to get well. And this might be kind of shocking for folks, especially if you're kind of new, if you've never worked with me or are really new to the podcast. Basically, I'm holding out my hands and I'm going, do you want to take the red pill or the blue pill? I mean, that's where we're going today. And so suspend your disbelief for a little bit. Listen to the entirety of the podcast before you make decisions. But hear this out. We're not sick today because of your classical, toxins and pathogens that were in the environment 50 years ago. We're sick because of quantum pathogens and quantum devices that have been put in our bodies in an overall attempt to suppress our health, to suppress our patterns of thinking and patterns of behavior, and to manipulate and control the population. So there, I said it. So let's talk about the nature of these quantum pathogens and what they do, how they express themselves. First of all, these quantum pathogens and devices, and we'll talk about those in just a little bit. We'll talk about what those are and what they look like and what they do in the body. But first of all, the quantum pathogens and devices supersede classical physics. They don't obey the rules of the classical physics system. So let me give you sort of an example of that. Let's say we all get together and we're going to play a game of baseball. And I'm up to bat and I am going to play by the quantum rules, and everyone else is playing by the classical rules. So I come up to bat, and the pitcher throws me the ball. And as soon as I hit the ball, it disappears and creates a wave function that allows it to bend light wherever it goes from that point forward. So I hit the ball and all of a sudden the ball disappears. It's there, it's still there, but nobody else on the field except me can see it. So everyone's searching for a ball that can bend light. And remember, if you can bend light, that means you basically make yourself invisible. So I'm running all the bases and I'm about to get a home run and they can't find the ball. And they'll never be able to find the ball. And I'll always win the baseball game because I am operating by a totally separate group of rules than they are. And they're at a massive disadvantage because they can only operate based on classical physics. They have to be able to see the ball, catch the ball to be able to throw me out. But I've programmed this ball with an algorithm that allows it to bend light. And so therefore, the players on the field can't see it. That's what these quantum pathogens and devices do. They've been put into the body through a variety of vectors that we'll get to, but they go into the body and they supersede the classical physics. They play by a separate set of rules that regular pathogens don't play by. Therefore, it makes the whole team in the body unable to see or address any of these pathogens or toxins. And of course, those pathogens and toxins are going to do what pathogens and toxins do, which is make people sick. Of course, some of these pathogens are also extremely intelligent and they are AI driven. And so they're able to circumvent the genetic material in our body. And they're able to manipulate systems and genetic information and endocrine information in the body that makes the body sick. And let me just talk about another quality of these pathogens and devices. First of all, they do not occur naturally in nature. These are not natural pathogens that you can walk out and catch from another person. These are pathogens that have been developed over time by the quantum physicists, by what I believe to be rogue pharmaceutical companies that have engineered these pathogens and then released them out into the public. They don't occur naturally in nature. So it's not like you can go into your fridge, let your half and half or yogurt go bad, and then you open up your container and find quantum pathogens there. That's not going to happen. That would be a classical physics system where you have visible pathogens that are growing in a classical physics system, and you could theoretically, kill those pathogens with something, and it would be fairly predictable, and it would make sense. Those rules would make sense. But these pathogens do not occur naturally in nature. They are foisted upon us through a variety of vectors. One of those is the release of genetically modified mosquitoes. One of those is genetically modified ticks. Also, vaccines contaminated, although I would not even call them contaminated, I would call them deliberately contaminated vaccines, will inject these pathogens in our body. And sometimes even hospital equipment can be, quote, contaminated with these pathogens. And so they have to have a delivery system because they cannot be caught. You can't catch them from someone else. They're not communicable. I can't cough on one of my kids and they receive a quantum pathogen from me. It doesn't work that way. These quantum pathogens can't replicate because they're created. Kind of like if you think about Sophia, the robot Sophia, the AI robot, or the AI robot Einstein, they can't really reproduce. They can't make one of themselves in sort of the natural way to reproduce. You have to make those robots. You have to create those robots. And that's what these pathogens are like. You have to create them, you have to make them. And they're being made and created somewhere. Probably in a lab, probably in a hidden lab somewhere. I don't know where they're being made, but they're being made and then put into mosquitoes and ticks and released into the public. So that's the first aspect of these quantum pathogens and devices, is that they do not occur naturally in nature. The second thing is that they override the genetic material and the programming in the body. You know, our blueprint for how we operate is our genetic material. It gives us everything that we need on a data level to function. It gives us life. It gives us programming. It gives us energy. When that genetic material is distorted or hijacked in some way, it becomes either suppressed, it becomes changed, it becomes altered. Well, one of the main quantum pathogens that I talk about a lot is MFI and Mycoplasma fermentans incognitus. And when MFI comes into the body, it is able to circumvent and suppress genetic information. So when all the family members in one family have MFI, then they're going to express similar symptoms. Why? Because all their genetic information is very similar. So you might have a group of a family that has diabetes, or diabetes runs in the family, or cancer runs in the family, or heart problems run in the family. And that's because MFI is suppressing that information. We have been told that it's a genetic problem, and that's not wrong. It is a genetic problem, but it's because something is suppressing that genetic information. And that's pretty radical. I mean, that's a radical paradigm, I know. But for the most part, when genetic information is unencumbered by pathogens or toxins, then it has the ability to express itself and heal the body naturally, and the body heal itself, not have to always. I mean, sometimes we need support and we need a boost because the infection is greater than the rate in which the body's able to kill that pathogen or toxin. But in relation to quantum pathogens and toxins, they override that genetic information so that any attempt by the body anyway to get rid of it is superseded, because this pathogen is smart. It's AI driven and AI empowered. So it has these running algorithms on a regular basis that continually is able to circumvent the immune system. This isn't really about like spirochetes hiding in the body. This is about quantum pathogens that are smart, that are brilliant, that are deep learning machines in the body. They're already there. So that's not something that's in the science fiction category of your library. This is real and it's been happening. And they override the genetic material and cause endocrine shutdown, lymphatic shutdown, neurotransmitter shutdown. You name a system, and I've probably seen people with MFI to have that shutdown going on. And that causes disease structures. And it causes prolonged disease structures because the body sort of becomes like this wasteland. It's really unable to defend itself create the hormone structures, the neurotransmitter structures, the lymphatic reaction, the immune system reaction, the healing systems function in order to heal itself, because it's deprived of the genetic material that is necessary to cause those things to happen. For example, if you're building a house, it doesn't matter if you have all the building materials laying around the work site. If you don't have the blueprint, you're not getting anything done. Or if you have half the blueprint, you can only build half the house. If you have blueprints but they are not in English, you're not going to be able to read them. That's the way it works in the body. Without the fullness of the genetic information, the body literally cannot perform certain tasks. Those tasks do not have the data that's needed, and they begin to shut down. So that's what quantum pathogens and toxins do. They shut down the genetic information, they suppress it. And the onset of that can be very sudden, particularly if you get MFI and you have certain subsets of genetic information that is really sensitive to hormone fluctuations, like MTHFR types of genetic structures. When MFI comes into the body and augments and suppresses the genetic information of someone who's MTHFR, they tend to express the disease structures even more strongly than sort of like your normal person who really doesn't have, that sensitivity. And that's because the MTHFR is really taken advantage of by MFI because, again, with MFI being a deep learning system and an algorithm-based system, it's able to read your genetic information, suppress what is necessary in the body for you to function. And, MTHFR people tend to be really super sensitive. They tend to be very artistic. They tend to be able to sort of be very spiritual. They're very aware. They're very smart, intelligent people, not like non-MTHFRs aren't, but there's just a different type of personality, different type of skill sets. And so MFI will take advantage of that sensitivity. One of the skill sets is the sensitivity to hormone functions. So they're super sensitive to environmental changes, even without MFI. MTHFRs are like that. But with MFI, it becomes overwhelming and extreme. And there's nothing that the body can do to circumvent those environmental stimuli, so they crash. I'm MTHFR, and what I find is even though I don't have MFI and I don't have all these different disease structures, the toxins and stuff, I'm still just naturally very sensitive. I'm very sensitive to noise. I'm very sensitive to emotion. I can kind of feel when the environment of the room changes. I'm a feeler. I tend to gravitate towards those skill sets. And when I had MFI, that was amplified to extreme, to the point where it would cause pain. It would cause extreme symptoms that ended up being physical, and it just blew me out of the water. Like I just couldn't function. And that's because MFI will take advantage of those particular genetic structures. But that's an example where particular genetic structures can cause certain symptom groups. And it's not because there's anything wrong with the genetics per se. It's because this pathogen is really ravaging the DNA so that the body cannot have the information it needs to do these different functions, to do these different tasks. And when I mean tasks, I mean like breathing, like digesting carbohydrates, like digesting gluten and dairy, being able to drink coffee, being able to navigate loud stimuli, being able to go out into the air and breathe it without having an allergic reaction. Those kinds of things that we just don't have the ability to do anymore for some reason. And that reason is largely because MFI and other quantum structures will circumvent the genetic information needed to be able to fully express itself and then be able to perform these tasks. So they override the genetic material, the programming in the body. That's the second attribute of these quantum pathogens and toxins. So you can see that, where I'm going with this is they don't play by the classical physics rules. They don't do things that normal classical pathogens will do because they're AI driven, number one, and number two, they have access to genetic information in a way that none of these classical physics pathogens have. The third attribute of these different pathogens or toxins is that they override body processes. And that's what I've just sort of gone over with the overriding of the genetic material. The trickle-down effect of that is that when they override the genetic material, they then can override the body processes. They have the ability and the function to create its own communication system within the body. So our body today, the way it's supposed to act is it uses the endocrine system as a communication system. That's the main way, is it releases hormones, it distributes those throughout the body. They're like little bitty algorithms or little bitty programs, like little bitty bots that go around in the bloodstream, go, hey, do this, hey, go do that, hey, fix this, hey, fix that. This needs less inflammation. This needs more fluid. This needs more nutrients. That's what they do. And those hormone releases are the communication structures. In the body, when you have a quantum pathogen, the quantum pathogen is going to supersede that communication structure and create its own. It creates what I call fake peptides, fake neurotransmitters, and it forces the body to receive them as if they are the natural communication structures, which is extremely toxic to the body. I mean, that's just another level of toxicity that happens with these different pathogens and toxins. You just have this level of toxicity because it's not using the communication structures that are innate or have been created for the body. So because of that, the wires don't work. The different body functions won't work because MFI forces the body to do things differently, to play by different rules and to play by its rules. So, for example, if you have MFI and you were to get another pathogen, for example, MFI says, you don't get to kill that pathogen. It sends information to the immune systems and says, nope, you're not allowed to kill this pathogen. I'm going to take care of this pathogen. And then it begins to disseminate this pathogen and reroute it to different places in the body so it can just sit there. They can sit there and cause disease and cause issues. And that's what MFI does. It manipulates the internal environment of the body using the body processes against itself, using the tunneling of the lymphatic system, for example, using the digestion against itself so that the body continues to maintain a disease state. So you can kind of hear in the background of this discussion an intelligence as if there's sort of an intent and awareness by these pathogens. And I can tell you without hesitation that these pathogens, these toxins have intent. There's intent behind them. There's intelligence. There's deep learning programs. There's deep learning systems that have been given permission to self-maintain and explore and be creative in the body to maintain a disease state. They have been given full reign. And not only have they been given full reign, but they have qualities about them that we're going to talk about in just a minute that supersede the classical physics of the body and makes it impossible without using quantum work, without using the quantum nature of the body with the muscle testing and the commands that I use. You cannot find these pathogens and toxins because they do really bizarre things. And we're going to talk about that in a second. It's really connected to the fourth point about these qualities of quantum pathogens and toxins. And that fourth quality is that they stay hidden. They use a variety of methods on a quantum level to hide from the body. It's kind of like let's go back to that store example again, where you go to the store, you park your car, you come back out, and you can't find your car because it's been quantumly hidden. Somebody has bent gravity or bent light so that you cannot find your car. Now, that's just not plain fair. If you can't find your car in the parking lot because it's bending light or somebody has given it properties to bend gravity, that's just plain by a whole nother different set of rules. And that's what these pathogens and toxins do. They have the ability to stay hidden because they rework the rules. The rules are not the classical physics rules in the body anymore. They have quantum abilities that we are going to get into in just a few minutes. And those quantum abilities give those pathogens and toxins the permanent ability to stay hidden. So that if you use anything in this classical system medical field, like let's just say you use tinctures or antibiotics or chemotherapy or whatever, you use the classical physics system in order to try and solve, unbeknownst to you, a quantum physics problem. And you don't know that. The body can't see these things. They can't see these pathogens and toxins. So if you try and use a tincture tincture or an oil or homeop or something else, something extreme, in order to navigate something that the body can't see, the body can't resolve it. The body still can't see it. You still can't find your car in the parking lot, even though you have a flashlight now, or even if you have special x-ray glasses, or even if you have an electromagnetic pulse reader. It doesn't matter. These instruments are not going to be able to detect something that can bend gravity, that can bend light, that have quantum abilities. And it's really sort of been by the grace of God, honestly, that muscle testing has been able to even pick up any of these things. The body knows that they're there, but it doesn't know how to get to them. The natural intelligence system can't get to it because it circumvents all these issues, all these classical physics rules. So it doesn't matter how many amazing weapons you have in your arsenal. If the problem is quantum in nature, you can't use a classical system grid to solve a quantum grid problem. So let's just review. The reason why we need quantum physics in order to navigate the healing that we need these days, or the wellness that we need these days, or to help solve the problems of these diseases today, is because they supersede classical physics. They play by a separate group of rules than regular pathogens do. They don't naturally occur in nature, so you can't reproduce them in a petri dish so that you can study them and figure out how to get over and above them. They also override the genetic material, the blueprint of the body, so your body is not able to function on a genetic level like it should be. They also override the body processes, so they completely circumvent the communication system within the body, override the endocrine system and the DNA system, so that it is only able to respond to MFI, the quantum pathogen. And when I say respond, what I really mean is obey. The body is forced to obey MFI constantly because of the suppression of the genetic information and the fake communication system that it sets up. So as a result, disease systems begin to set in, disease processes begin to set in, and that basically takes the body over. And of course, that fourth part of why we need quantum physics for these different pathogens and toxins that are quantum in nature is because they stay hidden. They have that ability to completely circumvent the classical physics rules that normal pathogens and toxins play by. That means that these quantum pathogens and toxins are inaccessible by the classical physics system. The body can't see them. It can barely detect them, although it can with the muscle testing work that I've done. But for the most part, you can't treat quantum pathogens with classical physics oriented paradigms. So oils and tinctures can only go so far. They can only navigate some symptom groups, give the information, give the body a little bit of information to function on some level. But for the most part, MFI can circumvent that. If it chooses to, it detects that the tincture or the supplement has come into the body, and it begins to rework that and rework the communication system in the body to reject it every time it comes into the body, which is, by the way, why sometimes you'll take a supplement if you have MFI and you feel really good for 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden you crash and burn every time you take the supplement. It's because MFI's already reworked that. It's reworked it so the body now has a crash and burn every time it takes a supplement instead of it feeling better. And it stays hidden while doing so because it is the guy at the baseball plate who can make light bend around the baseball. Nobody can see it. And so that's what we're going to talk about next, are the quantum attributes, how these pathogens and toxins stay hidden in the body. So here's where we go down the rabbit hole. If you haven't already sort of turned off the podcast by now being like, this is just really weird, there's no data or science behind this girl is just totally has no idea what she's talking about, that's great. I'm glad you're still here. But hang in there because things are about to get a little bit weirder. And understand that when I've done this work, when I've developed this work, I'm not addressing any other paradigm than this paradigm. So when my clients get well, it's not because of chance. It's not because of whatever. I'm not addressing anything except for this issue, these quantum devices, these quantum pathogens, and the quantum nature of the body. So when the clients get well, it's like you can't separate the paradigm from what's happening in the client, because that's the only thing we're doing. We're only doing muscle testing work and the quantum data work. So for things to improve and for the client to see symptoms reduce, it's not because he's, taking 14 or 15 different tinctures that are paralleling with this work and working. I mean, if that was working, then clients wouldn't be here to begin with. The whole reason people get to me is because nothing's working. They've tried everything and nothing's working. And again, that's generally because they're using a classical system, classical physics system against a quantum physics pathogen, which doesn't work. So let's talk about how the quantum pathogens and devices manipulate the body. So one of the first things that it does is they can bend and manipulate gravity. When you have the ability to bend and manipulate gravity, you have the ability to basically bend light. And you can bend gravity a couple of ways through these different algorithms. They're using these quantum time-space algorithms in order to create that flux, to create that gravity bending effect. They have figured out how to do that. CERN just is, backward engineering all of these different particle physics experiments that they're doing and just comes up with the algorithms in order to create that issue. It's just a backward engineering process. That's all that is. So when you bend gravity, the basic outcome of that is that you're going to be augmenting and manipulating light. So when gravity is bent and manipulated, the light responds to that and moves and does different things. So a couple of things that happens is that these pathogens and toxins can bend light. So think about for a second, if you can bend light, what can you do? You're basically invisible. I mean, why can we see things in our environment? Because the light rests upon these objects, bounces off, comes into our eyes, all that kind of good stuff. When you got into the dark, guess what you need to be able to function? You need a light, right? So when things are in the dark, the body cannot see them. And the body operates with light. That's, we don't think of it that way, but the body is light on the inside of itself. It uses light to see things. And if something can circumvent that light and can bend that light by manipulating gravity, and we see these things sort of in outer space. I mean, we see universes and massive objects bending light, lensing light, and some things can trap light. And that's what happens when gravity is manipulated. And that's what these pathogens and toxins do. They manipulate gravity, and that gravity manipulation then changes the way light works in the body. So one of those things is bending light. And that's what MFI does, is when it comes into the body, it already has the ability to bend light. So you're doomed from the beginning. You don't have an immune system that can bend light, unbend light, so that it can see a quantum pathogen. Most people's don't. There are very few people on the planet that have that ability. Some do. There's a small segment of the population. They're naturally immune to MFI because they have that genetic information that's needed to unbend the light, undo what is being done with the manipulation of gravity, and then they can kill MFI. That's actually a very small task for the people that are naturally immune to MFI. And by the way, those people that are naturally immune to MFI, they tend to be the people that are really well. They hardly ever get sick. They seem to have no chronic illnesses in their family, or it's just not really ever hit them. They tend to have really good energy. All that is connected to their ability to basically get rid of MFI on their own. So, but most of my clients don't have that ability, and they come, to me sort of limping, going, nothing is working. And that's because they're trying to fight a quantum pathogen that they don't have the genetic information to combat. So one of those attributes is that it bends light. The second attribute of some of these devices is that they lens light. So the genetic structure definitely doesn't have the ability to unlens light. And lensing light is just a movement of the light around a gravitational source where the light can't get through. It bends around. And so you can't see the object that is creating the bending of the gravity. You just see that the light is bending. And that's how the body sees it. The body sees some of these devices not as the object of themselves, but it can see, gosh, there's light that's being lensed. I can't see the actual thing that's lensing the light, but I know something's there. because I can see the light being lensed. So that's another way that the gravitational manipulation can affect the light in the body. Another way is that some of these quantum devices, particularly what's called a microtrap, can trap light. I mean, you can look up a microtrap if you want, but it's really no fun though because it's highly technical information. But I'm just going to read from an article here online, and if you want to take a look at it, you can look at the show notes and take a look at that article. I'm just going to be quoting from that. But basically, microtraps are used for quantum information processing and precision force sensing. In this particular article, they're just reviewing the recent experimental progresses towards quantum information processing and precision force sensing using neutral atoms in microtraps. And microtraps basically allow for, I'm quoting this article here, allow for a versatile manipulation of quantum states of atoms and ultra-cold atomic quantum gases. And so those are the kinds of things that are in the body, are these devices, these microtraps that come in and have a quantum nature. They process quantum information. They're like a little processor in some ways for the body. It attaches itself to DNA, and then it begins to process this information and really assists MFI in a variety of tasks. So MFI is really reliant on a variety of different devices that it brings with it in the body to circumvent the body and to basically have a little sort of experiment, a little a science fiction's, science experiment going on in the body at any given time. And that's an example of a device that appears in the body that is used by MFI. Some other things that these quantum devices do is they fragment time or they affect reality. They can, because of the way they're manipulating gravity and the algorithms that are embedded in these different particles that are implanted in the body, they can manipulate time. They can fragment time, particularly Morgellons. Morgellons is something that can fragment time and cause some very severe issues in the body. And I've seen people with Morgellons come out of Morgellons and go, it's like I have more time. It's like I have more time to do the things I want. I'm not as confused as I usually am. My memory is back. I don't have the brain fog. I don't have this feeling of disconnection from reality. And that's because Morgellons is a quantum device creating quantum states that disrupt our natural time flow. That's extremely disturbing. What we're talking about here is a ton of people on this planet in different timelines, in different time dimensions, experiencing a completely different reality. Although it looks very similar to everybody else's reality, they are experiencing a different reality than other people, which in my opinion is why the Mandela effect is happening. But that's not something that sort of I could empirically prove. It's just shooting from the hip going, gosh, if people don't remember things right, and there's a whole group of people that remember an event that didn't happen, there's something wrong with reality. And when you backward engineer that in the body, you find that these quantum devices are doing that. They're quantumly fragmenting time. That also allows, by the way, the fragmenting of time also allows for the splitting of the personality, the fragmenting of the persona. It allows for dissociative identity disorder to really meet its fullness. Trauma-based mind control certainly can use Morgellons as an assistive structure to help it along. Targeted individuals typically have this fragmenting of time also. They feel very distorted. They can't keep things in a linear time frame. And that just doesn't even include all the symptoms of Morgellons. Morgellons isn't just a particle collider that fragments time and affects reality. It also causes horrific physical symptoms, boils, skin lesions, eczema, psoriasis. All of those things are connected to Morgellons. Don't kid yourself. These things have not only physical manifestations, but they also have the quantum manifestations, which are much more subtle. They're much harder to pin down because they're all up in your head. You think it's you, but really your time and space is being distorted by these quantum pathogens. So one of the last weapons that these quantum pathogens and devices use is quantum entanglement and quantum tunneling. The quantum entanglement is really the development of a grid system, multiple grid systems that are interconnected with groups of people depending on the types of programming they have to create groups of symptoms either nationally or regionally. The quantum entanglement also allows the grid to be manipulated at any given time to manipulate people, thoughts, behaviors, that kind of thing. All that has to happen is the algorithms have to be changed just really subtly, and then things can go haywire. People can go south. They can think different ways. They can believe different things. They can manifest physical symptoms in different ways. And all you have to do is create a grid system with quantum entanglement so that when one person is feeling something, everybody on that grid feels something. Everybody is quantumly entangled because they have these particles that are all quantumly entangled within the grid. And there's a variety of things that can do that. Bosons can do that. Different particles can do that, particularly quarks, leptons, gauge bosons, Higgs bosons. Those are all particles that are usually embedded in the body with algorithms embedded in them that can cause a total destruction of the human system. It really adds to the destruction that MFI can do. But also, these particles can be quantumly entangled with one another so as to form a general overall grid, so that people in groups can be manipulated, algorithms in groups can be changed. So when we know what we know about quantum entanglement is when one particle reacts, the other ones react. And so that grid system allows for the overall manipulation of people groups, of regions, of localities, of people with certain types of devices in them. So if everyone has Morgellons, gets an algorithm change, then that's going to affect their symptoms on a group level. And you could really manipulate behavior that way by retooling the endocrine system to respond to the Morgellons or to the MFI rather than to the body itself. And then you can manipulate any hormone or neurotransmitter you want to respond in any way that you want. So, I mean, just think about it on a logistical, practical level. If all of a sudden you want to create riots, maybe just trash everybody's serotonin and their dopamine, to increase aggression. And that's really easy when you have quantum devices in the body and you have access via the quantum computers and through AI deep learning systems that are already embedded in these groups of particles. And by the way, what we're talking about is a grid with, different nodes. Each of us humans are supposed to be a node within the grid system. So they're not just manipulating people as a whole. They're using us as basically routers for information. So the information is routed through each of us using these quantumly entangled particles and distributed throughout the whole grid system. And that does make it very easy to manipulate people. Quantum entanglement is a critical piece of the quantum strategies that these pathogens and devices use. And one of the things that we have found is that when you find these particles, when you find these devices and quantumly release them, which is, my system that I use to combat all these issues, the quantum release takes everybody off the grid. So if I find a particle that is quantumly entangled with everyone else's particles, when I remove it from a client, everybody's gets removed. So you affect the entire grid itself. And that's really great. That's helpful. And sort of, even though the grid is extremely dangerous and really terrible for your health, it does have a single point of failure. And that single point of failure is the quantum release. It is that quantum entanglement that when it is quantumly released, the whole grid collapses. And that's what I've seen over the past, particularly the past 6 months to a year. As these grids are revealed, then these whole grid systems go down. People lose the functioning of the grid in their body and their health begins to increase. They begin to get relief from different physical symptoms that these grids were causing. Quantum entanglement is a big piece, but so is quantum tunneling. Quantum tunneling is the ability to supersede or tunnel through a barrier that the classical classical system, the classical physics system wouldn't allow you to do. So like, let's say you throw a photon at a barrier and that photon's just going to bounce off. But what quantum tunneling allows is for the superseding of that barrier, and the photon would land inside, say, for example, the body. So where normally particles couldn't land in the body because we literally have a skin and a physical barrier, quantum tunneling, using these quantum devices that are already embedded in the body, they act as a receiver, and the quantum tunneling can occur, and the devices can tunnel different bosons, different quarks, different leptons in order to bring them into the body. And normally they would just sort of like bounce off, just to be kind of specific about it. It's just kind of bounce off the body. But because the devices are in the body, it gives the boson sort of like an open door in a way. The quantum tunneling is sort of like, spiritually speaking, the open door, but it's really the ability for the classical physics to be surmounted, and the body receiving these different particles that it normally would not receive, would normally not have. And that's because these quantum devices have the ability to quantum tunnel. And that quantum tunneling ability is really handy when you want to add more technology to a human body. Let's say the human is not doing what you want it to do. It's not getting quite as sick as you would want it to do. It's not thinking the thoughts it wants you to think, and it wants to add more algorithms to your body so that you would be forced to think and do certain things because your body's responding that way. It's kind of like an illness you can't shake. You just can't seem to get rid of these migraines. You can't seem to get rid of the ringing in your ears. Your digestive issues just continue to get worse and worse, and you can never get rid of them. The pain levels increase, they never decrease. Those are the kinds of things that force you into sort of a corner. You're not able to navigate your life like you want to because of these different symptom groups, and you'd probably be a whole lot more free, especially up in your head, to think of new ideas and create new things and be more successful if you didn't have all these physical symptoms creating these issues. And that's what the quantum tunneling allows. It allows for new data to come in, new things to be put on genetic material, and new programming to happen. So those are just, sort of a few of the different mechanisms that these quantum pathogens and toxins use in order to circumvent the classical system that the body generally operates in. And the way that this work works is I use the muscle testing and the information from the body and the quantum nature of the body that has been largely undiscovered up until now, I believe, to circumvent these objects and to be permanently, I guess inoculated might be the right word, but permanently unable to receive those anymore. Or if they do come into the body, you have the ability to quantumly release them immediately. So it's definitely a new paradigm. I mean, when you're thinking about quantum physics, it doesn't occur to you that these things could be in the body creating health problems. And that's what muscle testing has availed us of, is the ability to ask the body these questions, to circumvent these different devices, to be able to use quantum physics and the quantum nature of the body to then permanently be free from them, to never have them in the body again. And that, I get it, that's really a different paradigm, but it's the paradigm this work operates from. And as people get well, that is what is being addressed, are these pathogens and particles on a quantum level. And the cool thing about this quantum work is that it doesn't only just solve the quantum issues, like the quantum devices and the quantum pathogens, but it also solves the classical issues, which is really cool, because let's just say someone doesn't have a quantum pathogen. They don't have MFI. They don't have any of these different devices that are quantum in nature, and they just have an overgrowth of E. coli, or they got bit by a tick and have a bunch of mycoplasmas in the body, or they have an overdose of some kind of toxin that they got when they were a kid. This quantum work addresses that as well, and it addresses it way more efficiently than the body has the information for now. Glyphosate and DDT are a perfect example of that. The glyphosate and the DDT is Actually, I have had several clients with DDT and have had autoimmune diseases due to early childhood DDT contamination. And these are people that are usually in their 40s or their 50s. They're not generally people that are like in their teens and 20s. But that early exposure created incredible autoimmune issues. And so the quantum release of those really frees the body very, very fast of something that it could not normally get rid of itself because of its toxicity level and because of the way it's man-made, that man-made chemical nature of it. So that's the cool thing, is that not only does this quantum work deal with the really prolonged quantum issues in the body, but also the classical systems too. So I hope that really helps. I hope that gives you a sense of why we need the quantum work. And the quantum work is really just about asking the body questions using muscle testing and asking the body to quantumly navigate these things using a variety of very specific commands. And the body can do that. It can do it very, very fast and very, very well in a way that really minimizes the negative effect on the body. The great thing about this work is you don't get a detox. You don't have to do this sort of kill, detox, refresh, kill, detox, refresh, this sort of cycle that a lot of people are in order to navigate something that they've never even been able to navigate to begin with, because it's all quantum in nature. This work also supersedes the general problems that the classical physics ends up sort of having to deal with, which is like the detox cycles that are really, really painful. Once something is quantumly released, it's gone. It's over. The body can immediately begin to respond with healing in the body. And that's what happens, is the body heals itself. And that's really what it's able to do. It's just been circumvented by these quantum pathogens and these quantum toxins that have incredible abilities that it looks like certain groups of people have really taken advantage of in order to make the population sick. And that is a tragedy. That whole aspect is a tragedy. It is lives lost, lives wasted with illness, lives suppressed because people could not be who they really were because they stayed sick for most of their life. And that's what these quantum pathogens and toxins do. I hope this helps you guys. I hope it explains the different paradigms that we're operating from today, which is the classical paradigm, the classical physics versus the quantum physics, that we're just not in Kansas anymore. We're not in the world that we were in 50 years ago. We're dealing with an entirely different group of pathogens and toxins that don't operate with the classical physics. So our body cannot get rid of them or kill them or take care of them. So if you'd like more information or if you'd like to schedule a session, you can go to my website, www.quantumcommand.net. You can take a look at some of the information there, some of my journey. You're welcome to schedule a consult with me if you'd like to talk with me a little bit more about your particular situation and ask questions about, what I think might be going on with you and if this work could help you, which of course I always think this work could help people. So you're welcome to do that. Hit the subscribe button so that you can get updates on when I post stuff, and that little bell will give you immediate updates of when I post stuff on the YouTube channel. So if this has been helpful for you, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section. And like I said, check out my website for more information. Been great talking with you today, and this is Natalie Morris with Quantum Command, and I wish you a good day. See you on the next broadcast.